Going on, Winnipeg fans from all over Canada, all over the United States, or wherever you're listening from. This is the Winnipeg Terminal Podcast. Get ready to board because we're having some fun tonight. I'm Mike. This is Joe. And Joe, I think we've got a pretty jam packed show tonight, huh?
We sure do, and I just want to say before we get into it that I'm very glad we're not piloting a plane right now with all the technical issues we've dealt with tonight to get this rolling. We can pretend to be on a piloting a plane tonight, but I'm just happy we're not actually doing that tonight. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of wreckage somewhere.
Let's just say we hit some turbulence with a lot of technical issues, which, I mean, we've heard in the news many a times a few of the airlines that have had some issues along the way, and apparently the Winnipeg terminal isn't immune either. So let's just continue the takeoff, and we'll get to cruising altitude, and we'll hit a few less bumps, and we should have a pretty smooth ride to our destination, which is all of the Jets and Bombers news that you need to know. So, what do you say? Let's get to cruising altitude.
All right, let's make this happen.
All right. So, a lot of news to dive into, but first, let's just kind of acknowledge the fact that all good things must come to an end. And unfortunately, that is what happened against the Flyers, where the boys lost 2-0, just couldn't get on the board, but they were never really counted out of that game, which we were talking in one of the technical issues, Joe, that I mean, just the fact that they weren't out of the game was a really just a great sight to see. They were still battling, which in years past they really haven't done. If they go down one, it seemed like they were out of the game. So, what's the big differences in your opinion this year?
I think it's just the belief that they have a belief in themselves. They're showing that they could play a solid defensive team game, and the goals will come and go. Hockey is a weird sport like that where you can do just about everything right and still just have things bounce the wrong way and you just end up off the board. Not saying that that's what happened against Philly. Philly's a good team, a better team than
Mhm.
many people gave them credit for at the beginning of the season. But you could play a great game and come out on the back end in hockey more so than just about any other sport out there. So it's gonna the long winning streaks will take it when they come, but you can't count on them to go on forever.
Right. And I mean, 8 games is still solid. And, looking at the last, we'll just even say 20 games that they've played has just, they've been stellar. There's just, it seems like there's no stopping this team. And one of the things that, I don't know about you, but I see all of those money puck odds, all the time. They come up on my Facebook. And I don't want to say the disrespect against the Jets, but like it seems like on those money puck odds that they are never the favorites. There's teams that are playing way worse than the Jets are that have better odds to make a deeper playoff run. And it always blows my mind because it's not like the Jets are just a very top heavy team like some other team in Canada, if you catch my drift. They have a very, very deep team. And while they may not have a flashy Connor Bedard or Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, they don't necessarily have one of those generational talents. But what they do have is a group of guys that can score, that can fight hard, and obviously find themselves at the top of the league.
And they can play defense too. That streak of 3 goals or less is still going on. So
Mm-hmm.
that one is amazing as it is, feels a lot more potentially sustainable than a win streak would be.
Yeah, especially when you sustain it for 33 games. Like, we're halfway through the season now, and for the large majority of it, they've let in 3 goals or less. And that actually ties Toronto from 1950 to 1951, that season. There's only a handful of teams that have gone this far and given up 3 goals or less. And yeah, I mean, you can give all the credit to the Blue Liners because they are playing out of their minds this year, but it's not just the blue line. They've tightened that up from years past, ever since about the deep run that they had in 2018. But it's also their forwards that are playing just incredible defense too. And we were talking before, that has not been the case historically since in the Thrashers or the Jets, really. Um, with their forwards playing as good of defense as they are now. Like, not to knock at Wheeler, but when he was wearing the C and his boy Shifley never showed up to play defense. But sure, he's day to day right now. But 41 points, 41 games, and the offense is there, but the defense from Shifley, this is something that we haven't really seen since he's been drafted here. Obviously, the first draft pick since the Thrashers moved to Winnipeg, but it's beautiful to see.
That it is, and I've seen that list a few times. I don't have it in front of me of what the top 5 teams, and there's a couple from 1928 and 1929. I mean, what did they do? Forget to put the goals up for a while that year?
Yeah, right. Like they were ridiculous streaks, but I mean, in this day and age where goal scoring is very, very common. I mean, good goaltending is too. I mean, I feel like the players you look at some of the guys now, and you could say, oh, well, 20 years ago maybe they'd be a generational talent or whatever, but now it's just your fourth line grinder, But to have a streak like that in today's game is just incredible, you know. And to expand upon that further too, the Jets are the only team in the NHL right now that have given up 100 or less than 100 goals. Now they are at 99, so barring a shutout against Ottawa, that streak is likely going to come to an end, unless of course they do shut them out. But nonetheless, we're halfway through the season and they have not given up 100 goals yet.
No, and what's the next team at? 109?
Yeah, the Kings, they're 109, and I mean that's a 10 goal difference. And if memory serves me correctly, the Kings have played two more games than the Jets too. Or sorry, the Jets have played two more games than the Kings. But it's another thing too. We talked about the defense that the skaters are playing, but how about the just lights out goaltending too? We were talking last week that Hellebuck and Brossois arguably the best tandem in the league. But when you look at their numbers, I don't think it's even arguable at this point. Hellebuck, 925 save percentage, which that's incredible, and a 219 goals against average. But Brossois, now of course he hasn't played as many games, but I mean he is literally the same as Hellebuck pretty much. 923 save percentage and a 218 goals against average. So if we're talking, Connor Vesna here, well, look at his backup. His backup's playing just as good as he is.
Yeah, and there's no drop off between Hellebuck and Brossois. Now, mind you, as a fan, I'd rather see Hellebuck in the net for obvious reasons. But it's
Sure.
really nice to know that there's not much of a drop off between 1A and 1B right now.
Oh, absolutely. And like the stats that Brossois is putting up, that could be a starting goaltender on just about any team in the NHL right now. If he could sustain that over a longer period of time, of course, he's a backup. He hasn't played as much. But I tell you what, between when he was in Winnipeg the first time to when he went to Vegas, something must have clicked when he went to Vegas, because not to say he was bad when he was in Winnipeg, because he wasn't, not by any stretch, but he started to become lights out in Vegas and makes a return to Winnipeg, and these are the numbers that he's putting up. I mean, I love this tandem that we have, and that goes back to the money puck odds that I was saying earlier. And it's like the disrespect is so real because we have the depth, and we have enough goal scorers that may not be, like I said, your generational talents, but enough that contribute on the score sheet every single night. And I think that we have at least a very good chance of making a deep playoff run. This team has given me that 2017, 2018 vibes, and maybe be able to clear that last hurdle and make it to a Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, and when one guy goes down, another one comes back. We just got Kyle Connor back. You mentioned Shifley's day to day, much better than being out 6 to 8 weeks. But it
Mm-hmm.
was nice to be able to pull him out, knowing Connor was coming right back.
And that's the thing, you said too that one guy goes down, the next guy steps up, and all of that win streak. I mean, they they had the next guy stepping up. All of this was without their leading goal scorer. It's just, you love to see it, and like I said, there has definitely been a culture change in that locker room. You can see it transpire on the ice, and it makes me think last year with Bonus when they had the collapse, and it was not to jinx anything, but it was around this time, of course. But I think that he was still kind of getting a feel for things, of course. And now this year, just firing on all cylinders and really just kind of taking the city by storm, taking the league by storm, you know?
Yeah, they had an off season to get players in that would fit Bonus's system and Bonus's persona and what he wants on the ice. The thing that drives me nuts about the NHL in general, well, one of the many things, but the one thing competitively on the ice is that teams are so quick to change their head coach. They don't take the
Yeah.
time to build based off of what their head coach wants to do. It's either perform or go away, and it's that quick. You can't really do that in a team sport like this where you take a coach that wants to do one thing, he gets a year and a half, he's out the door. Well, you just wasted 2 off seasons. You wasted the off season before and the off season that was before. You just pushed him out the door and brought in somebody that does something completely different. So now you have to spend next off season and the off season after that giving that new coach pieces and before you fire him, and then you're back to square one. That seems
Mhm.
what a lot of NHL teams are caught in, and they just won't
Yeah.
change they won't sit there and go, "Okay, we're stuck. Let's get out of this. Let's pick a cornerstone and let's build that way."
And, to your point too, like, I mean, I think I can speak for a lot of Winnipeg fans, especially myself, and I'm sure that you probably felt the same way. When, the offseason rolls around after either A, barely missing the playoffs or getting bounced in the first round. The first thing that you want is for your team to attack free agency. You see all these big names that go out there, and then they sign with other teams, and then some of your puzzle pieces are leaving too. And you sit there like, well, Chevy, what are you doing? Like you just kind of like rubbing your hands together and just not really doing anything. Like let's figure this out. Let's get someone here, you know but I think that he is really onto something because there haven't really been big names that have, made a huge splash. Like we're not going out there and signing the big name, is what I'm getting at. But when you look at the top to bottom of our forwards, of our defensemen, I mean, this is like we've been saying, as deep of a team as it gets. And you don't have to have that big name if you have the chemistry and if you have that right culture in the locker room, much like we've been seeing, that can translate to some very good things on the ice. And you can overcome some of those stars, your McDavids, your Bedards, your Ovechkins, Crosbys, so on and so forth, you know, and we don't have anyone that's necessarily like on that level, we'll say, or an Austin Matthews, but we do have Kyle Connor, we have Mark Scheifele, those guys that are your constant goal scorers. But then you look at the score sheet and you see someone new on the score sheet every night, and it just goes to show how deep the team is. You can beat that term all you want, but it's true.
Yeah, you've got players up and down the second line, the third line that can put the puck in the net when they have opportunities to. They're going to find ways to make those opportunities as well. And even if the opportunities aren't there, they're not going to cost you goals because they're out of position. They're going to get back. They're going to play some solid defense, reload, try to make something happen the next time around.
And you know what I really like this year as opposed to years past too. When say that Paul Maurice or even Rick Bonus, when they have to juggle lines for injuries or any sort of reason to juggle lines, up until this year, it always seemed that the lines being juggled around either caused tension or it just they didn't jive well together on the ice. And You heard time and time again about Wheeler and Shifley getting, if they're getting split up, like there's all that tension that was there. But now anytime that you need to juggle the lines, it seems like the boys have all the chemistry in the world. It seems like they've been playing on the same line for years, you know?
Yeah,
And that's another thing too, is just that's why I think there's that culture shift. Of course, you don't know until you're behind those closed doors. But I do think that from what they've been putting out on the ice, I think that there has been some sort of culture shift.
yeah, there's something going on that's better than what was happening last year because last year, about March, you just saw the million-mile stare from us from a few players, just like what is going
Hmm.
on, with no real changes made to try to fix what was wrong. I'm
Yeah,
hoping they were making attempts to identify what was wrong, but they weren't making any drastic moves. But that kind of goes back to my point with the head coaches is Bonus didn't have the pieces that last year that fit what he wanted to do. There were some outliers, and from the looks of it, the players that didn't fit what he wanted to do are now somewhere else. He's got guys that want to be in his system, want to play that way, and it's just night and day.
and I think Dubois might be one of those because we were talking before the show that at this point, I wouldn't even trade Velarde for Dubois one for one. I wouldn't, and I don't think that a lot of I don't think a lot of Winnipeg fans would want that either. Um, but now we've talked about the past, and I want to look forward now. Wrapping up the homestand with a big win after a pretty tough loss. It's great to end the homestand with a win. Now they're going out east, and one thing that has struggled, the Jets have been firing on all cylinders, but they've really kind of struggled on the power play. With the Jets, their power play 17%, ranking 23rd in the league, and for a team that is second in goal differential, and for a team that is at the top of the standings, you would like to be ranking a little higher than 23rd in your power play. Now, I'd like to see that at least at 20%, of course. But, sometimes the best way to get it going is to face someone who is equally weak in special teams, going the other way. Ottawa, their penalty kill 72% and ranked 31st in the league. And, I think that especially getting Kyle Connor back, I think that should start to see a little bit of an improvement in the power play. But, maybe get it going. If Ottawa takes a penalty, whether it's a good penalty or a bad one, get something going, get momentum on special teams, and that'll go a long way because part of this trip is Boston and Toronto, so they've got a tough road trip.
They do. They certainly do. Facing Ottawa first is a good way to start, though. And they have been moving the puck better and keeping the puck better on the power play lately.
Hmm.
Haven't had a lot of results out of it yet, but you're seeing them start to build something. And if they can continue to improve on it, they're going to get back into about the middle of the pack in the league by around the trade deadline, hopefully. Percentages are tough to jack up immediately, but you work on them slowly but surely.
Hmm. Now this is
Boston's
going.
going to be a tough nut. I do remember Winnipeg having a really nice night against them in Winnipeg, but in Boston's going to be harder. And then that
Right.
Toronto game is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, that will be interesting. Now, this is going a little bit off script here, off a tangent, but you were mentioning the trade deadline, and of course, there's all the rumors that are out there, and we're not here to start new rumors, but we are here to maybe banter a little bit about them. And what I mean by that is, of all of the rumors that you see out there, who would you most like to see come to the Jets, and what would you be willing to give up?
Do you mess with this team?
That's what I was thinking too. Like, you hear, and of course, if it was like 6 years ago, you'd get a lot more excited about a name like Patrick Kane, of course. But like, I don't know if you mess with them. They are playing such great hockey right now. I I don't know if you want to mess with the chemistry just for the sake of bringing in a superstar rental.
No, and I don't think there's anybody out there that would greatly improve that team for the value that we'd have to give up on that. I just don't see it.
Yeah, like, asking price for Gensel, for example, because he's apparently on the trading block, and it looks like he might be, or at least one of the rumors, anyways, is that he would be heading to Vancouver, which that, of course, would conflict the Jets in the Western Conference, being that Vancouver is right on our heels. But the asking price, it seems like it would be a first rounder, an NHL ready player, and a top prospect. That's a haul to give up for the sake of a rental. I don't know if I'd want to do that because, think about going into this season, how many question marks there were. And the Jets were probably the most intriguing team because we don't have that superstar. We don't have that, like we said, Austin Matthews, Connor Bedard, or Connor McDavid. And there was the contract situation with Scheifele and Hellebuck, and everyone was wondering and a little perplexed as to where the season was going to go. And I'll be honest, if you ask me, I would have not thought on January 17th that the Jets would be at the top of the league. I would have thought once they signed those extensions, I would have thought, okay, they're keeping the core together. They're at least going to be maybe a wild card team, maybe top three in the division. But man, they are just firing on all cylinders. And like you said, I don't know if I would touch this team. I like
No,
what Chevy put together.
right. And being that it's Winnipeg, you're looking for players that want to be there. Some players
Oh yeah,
value the lifestyle. They value being in a warm climate. They value being in a big city. Those aren't the players that are going to come to Winnipeg. You want to find guys
right.
like Niederreiter that come, look around, and go, "I want to be here. This place is awesome to play hockey in."
Yeah, that's what I love about Nino because you always hear about the negative lack of Wi-Fi or it's cold and all that fun stuff. But
And that one
you
makes
have
me laugh the most because, like, you play hockey for a living. You're used to being cold. Just deal with it.
yeah. And then you have Nino that's like, this place is awesome. They treat you really well as a hockey player. And I mean, he's very true in everything that he's saying. And it's nice to have that positive publicity instead of the opposing players who say, oh, well, the city sucks because there's nothing to do. You know, I mean, when you're an opposing team, you go to the city and sure, you might go out on the town or whatever after a night, maybe have like a couple days off or whatever, but it's not like you're living there or whatever for, the long term. So you don't really know what the city's about unless you are there, you know? So I just that's why that one
Speaking as
always
a
rubs
couple
me.
of out of towners ourselves, right?
Yeah, right. We not like we are any experts on it, but we go there a lot. But I mean, we're talking about how great of a city Winnipeg is, and we both live in Wisconsin.
Right.
So one of the well, speaking of Wisconsinites, this is I was actually going to talk about Adam Lowry before, but let's just talk about the Wisconsinite that's on the Jets, Mason Appleton, finally breaking that 25 game goal drought. There we go. Said that backwards. Kick me out.
No, I didn't touch it. You were
I don't know
saying
what
nice
happened.
things about a Wisconsinite. I wasn't gonna stop you.
I was kind of surprised with that, but hey, that's a little bit of turbulence that we hit. But now, talking about Mason Appleton firing on all cylinders right now because he broke the drought. He just had a birthday, and I will say this just because I'm happy with the result. I might not necessarily be a fan of the Packers, even though I live in Wisconsin. I know Mason Appleton is, and Packers didn't just beat Dallas, but whoo, did they beat them? It was not pretty. I mean, kind of got a little close towards the end, I guess. But man, most of that game was just a mugging.
That was
So
enjoyable to watch for me. I know a lot of our viewers are in Winnipeg. Minnesota's the closest team. A lot of them are Vikings fans, but at least they may be able to appreciate the fact that Dallas got their butts kicked. We don't even have to mention who beat them or anything like that. But
yeah, I think anyone that's not a Cowboys fan enjoyed that game, especially since Dallas was a 2 seed and Green Bay was a 7 seed.
yeah,
That was nice too.
that was a lot of fun. It was just a fun watch.
And I'm sure that Mason was enjoying every minute of that too. Um, we already talked about Shifley, day to day, of course, but 41 points in 41 games, so that's a big loss. But one person goes down, next person steps up, and that's where leadership comes into play. And I mean, our captain leading from the front, 6 points, 5 of those assists, 1 goal, of course, in the last 5 games going into this game against Ottawa. So, I mean, I think the captain is leading from the front. I think that he keeps playing like that. I think the rest of the team is going to follow suit, and it's going to be a tough matchup against Boston in their own barn and Toronto against their own or in their own barn. But I'm confident about this road trip.
Yeah, there's going to be a really interesting clash of styles between Toronto and Winnipeg too. Because
Oh
as we
yeah.
mentioned last week, Toronto's very front loaded, weaker on the backside. Winnipeg is very strong on the defensive, facing up against their strength, and are
Hmm.
strong enough on the offensive side to give. Well, let's face it, Columbus is giving Toronto fits on defense. So who's not going to?
Right. And I mean, like Toronto has been in some sort of special hell with their goaltending anyways. So we'll just leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that because watch in a week they'll have won 7-2. Winnipeg's like, where'd our streak go? And well, we'll be sad.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking football, so might as well circle back to this. Now, of course, there's plenty of Bombers news, and we were joking about that earlier today. We were like, of course, it's the middle of the season for NHL, but there might be more Bombers news than Jets news. So, first off, I mean, this might seem trivial, but it does open up a can of worms to a debate that's going on in the NFL. And as we've alluded to, it has presented some problems in the past. But Investors Group Field is getting new turf. So, do you think that the new turf is gonna play a factor? Do you think that they should go grass, or because that's obviously the big debate in the NFL right now?
Yeah, I think probably the safer play in Canada as far as being able to keep the field in a decent shape would be field turf. Just simply hard with how harsh the winters would be to be able to make a grass field work work as well as you'd want it to. Just be nice to get a new set because I actually got to walk the field after the Banjo Bowl. Actually, the
Mm.
day after, there was a fan appreciation event the next day that we ended up going to the stadium for, and got to walk on the field. And I'm just like, ooh, this is in worse shape than I thought it was. So clearly, they agree because they decided to replace it.
Yeah, maybe some high school fields are in better shape.
Well, if we're talking about Texas high school fields, I think they get most of their stadiums are like state of the art these days, aren't they?
Texas high school football, I feel like you see pictures of some of those stadiums, and good God, they're bigger than some college ones, and look like it's kind of like at UND, the Ralph, and that hurts as a St. Cloud State fan to say. But looking at the Ralph, they have such a nice barn, and it's better than some NHL arenas.
Yeah, and some of their talent keeps trickling into the NHL too. As much as I dislike that as well, being a Wisconsin fan, so
Yeah, I think that we can
I
have a
miss that
mutual hatred.
rivalry. I miss that rivalry being as hot as it was at one point.
You know what? I think Oh yeah, I am wearing my St. Cloud State attire as well. So here I am
That's
talking about UND.
that's 2 straight weeks we've made a WCHA reference.
Yep. And well, I mean, when you're a St. Cloud State alum, they're the college hockey topic is going to come out eventually.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
it's just the way they rearranged everything when the Big Ten decided to make a college hockey conference just kind of wrecked it all for me.
yeah, no, I get that. Now, talking about debates that are going on in the NFL, and of course talking about the CFL, it's kind of the point of this. A familiar face has been rumored to make a return. Now, I want to get your thoughts on this first.
Okay, Chris Streveler is looking for work, looking for a quarterback position. He did come back to Winnipeg for the Banjo Bowl weekend. Had a very couple popular autograph signings. Basically, a living legend in Winnipeg, and could probably write his own ticket. I'd be interested to see if there's other teams interested in him in the CFL. Because if there is, other teams may have the salary cap wiggle room more than Winnipeg would.
That's
Now,
the hard.
Winnipeg's had Stanley Bryant re-sign for a lesser deal. Kenny Lawler's renegotiated to bring down to get some cap room open. Brady Oliveira and Dalton Schoen are both free agents. Who knows where they go, if they come back or what happens with them. But Winnipeg's not going to be a team that's going to be able to throw 150K at a third down quarterback.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be great. It would be a nice sentimental reunion. But also, he's 5 years older than when he was here for the Grey Cup in 2019, of course, or yeah, 5 years older. I had to do math there for a second. Um, and so I did an interesting little comparison where his NFL career, we'll call it, spanning 9 games between the Jets and the Cardinals, never started a game, but he did appear in 9. And he went 27 for 40, which honestly is a pretty decent completion percentage, 67.5% for 231 yards. Now, let's just pretend that this is one game. 231 yards might not necessarily be that great, with 40 pass attempts, but a little less than 10 yards per pass, completed pass. One touchdown and one pick. Now, when I was looking at his stats from 2019, like you had mentioned, third down quarterback, he's going to throw some picks, but I kind of forgot how many picks that he threw. I knew that it was a little more than his touchdowns. I think his rushing touchdowns kind of overshadowed that a little bit. But in 2019, he played 17 games, started 7, 156 for 234, so that's 66.7 completion percentage, which very consistent with what he did in the NFL too. 1,564 yards. That's actually not bad. That's about 10 yards per pass, completed pass, and actually that would be 10.4 yards. My math is correct. 8 touchdowns and 14 picks. That's where you get a little antsy. But like I said, his rushing touchdowns overshadowing that a little bit. 12 in 2019. So not to
Yeah,
say that,
that team in the red zone was run first, run second, run third.
yeah, and I don't want to take anything away from him because he was a big part, a big part in that Grey Cup in 2019, but is it going to be worth trying to finagle a little bit more of that salary cap?
Yeah, I'd be thrilled to see him back if he'll take somewhere close to what Dakota Prukop's taking, because Dakota's had that role for the last couple of years. But it's just not. It's a luxury item that the Bombers probably couldn't afford. And at this
Right.
point, 5 years later, the body's not going to be quite as able to take all the hits that job entails too.
Yeah, no kidding. And um, yeah, so now you were mentioning about Stanley Bryant too. Speaking of getting older, um, took a pay cut though.
Yep, just I that this team, Adam Big Hill did it a couple years ago. He took a really big one, from what I understand, just to stay in Winnipeg, stay with this group, and try to win as many Grey Cups as they could. I still circle 2025, November 2025 on my calendar, because that's going to be the end of this core group's run. A lot of
I
players are
think
going to
so.
retire after it. A lot of new blood will be in after that. Hopefully, it's a reloading situation because we still have the full front office, which
Hmm.
is amazing considering in November we're thinking Walters might be gone. Somebody's going to be interviewing Gafea, McManus. They could lose all three, probably not all three, but a big chunk of their personnel grouping that's been so fantastic. And come in January and they're locked in. That's the best Christmas present a Bomber fan could have, beyond Brady and Dalton's re-signing as well.
And I mean, I think too that in 2025, like I think that they're just going to go all in, and even with the core that they have, I mean, you don't want to say the window is going to close after that, but it's a very good possibility that it will. And
Right.
I
I don't
think,
think I don't think you have many left of Zach Collaros, Stanley Bryant, Jamarcus Hardrick, Willie Jefferson, Jackson Jeffcoat, Adam Big Hill. I don't think any of those guys, maybe one or two, but the vast majority will be gone in less than 24 months. So they're going to do everything they can to win the next two. They may need some time to reload after that. Hopefully, not long, and we'll
hopefully
go
it's
from
not a
there.
30-year drought.
No, let's not see that.
I'd prefer not to.
No,
But
even
yeah,
showing
now,
up halfway through that was unpleasant.
yeah, right. Now, another, pay cut that ended up because of a bonus, I guess, too, but also it freed up some cap room. Kenny Lawler's restructured too.
Yep.
Um, last year caught 50 passes for 901 yards and 6 TDs in 12 games. That's 901 yards. Wow, that's I was blown away by that. But um,
Once he got back in the lineup last year, he was the deep threat.
oh
That it
yeah,
really changed the dynamic of how that offense worked, because Dalton Schoen was the deep threat the year before and still kind of was afterwards, but a lot less so once Kenny got to be the deep guy.
yeah. And originally slated to earn $310,000, now earning 285. So not much of a pay cut, but enough, and
And the
anything kind of
cap's
helps.
like 5 million or so. Any little bit helps.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going with that. And I mean, two-time West Division All-Star, one-time CFL All-Star, and obviously two-time Grey Cup champ. So that's a big resume that you got, and for him to restructure the contract like that, it just goes to show to our original point that they really are going to go all in, going into the next this year and next year.
Yeah, and what was this organization was in the same spot that the Jets were in the last couple of years, where free agents were going to make you spend a premium to have them come. I remember Nick Moore being the big signing, like 2015 or so. He was paid top receiver money, and he was at best a third receiver in the league.
Yep.
But that's the kind of money you had to give to guys to come to Winnipeg because the culture hadn't been built yet.
That's an interesting point you make about the Jets too. When we were talking about how Nino was like putting that, like telling the media and everything how great of a city Winnipeg is to play in, and that hearing something like that from a guy that's in the trenches, such as Nino, of course. Do you think that something like that, plus the culture change that we've seen in the locker room, do you think that is going to attract other talent to Winnipeg eventually?
It's a definitely a step in the right direction to have somebody selling Winnipeg as a place to come play hockey, and winning cures a lot of other problems.
Yeah.
So if they can have a nice season, finish first or second in the division, win a playoff round or 2 or 3 or 4, that'd be great too, but
Say, yeah.
just show that you're a top 5 to 8 in the league, you get a lot more attention than you would if you're sitting around 16. And when
Hmm.
you're sitting around anywhere between like 12 and 20, there's not a lot to break the ties between the two. So that's the type of when you're in that rut, you're gonna have a player say, "I'd rather go to Miami. And I'll
Hmm.
play for the 14th best team instead of the 12th best team because I'm in Miami instead of here."
Yeah.
Well, if you're up in the upper crust of the league, that's a less of a consideration at that point.
Right. And, team that comes to mind was actually the Pittsburgh Penguins, believe it or not, because they were in danger of being sold, and ended up potentially relocating. But of course, Mario Lemieux steps in, and that team, nobody wanted to go because that team was so bad. And then all of a sudden, you get a guy like Crosby, you get a guy like Malkin and Letang. Those guys have been playing together for so long and selling the city. And, and this is coming from a guy who hates the Penguins, believe it or not. But, then all of a sudden, all this talent wanted to show up in Pittsburgh because they had that winning culture. And like you said, winning solves a lot of problems. And it was just, the city of Pittsburgh itself, this coming from a guy who lived there, rains a lot. It may not necessarily be the cleanest city in the world, but I love it, and if you can look past the rain and yeah, maybe the city's not the cleanest, but it does have its positives too. And when you shine light on the positives instead of the negatives, it becomes more attractive.
And it's a lot easier to look for the positives when the team's doing well and you got a chance to be part of something special.
Very much so. And yeah, Penguins had a pretty special run. Them and Chicago in the 2010s. Yeah, that one hurts. Both of those teams, I
Mhm.
hate them both.
Mhm.
Oh, well, let's switch gears to something a little lighthearted. We'll make our
Yes,
initial
please.
descent.
Let me forget that Chicago was good at something.
Yeah, let's start our initial descent and wanted to talk about our maybe some of the cities that we've seen the Jets play in, maybe a couple trips that we've made or plan to make. Joe, I'll start with you on this one though.
Well, I'm gonna have to be completely honest. I've seen the Jets play once.
Oh, really?
That was in Winnipeg in like March of 2014. It
Okay.
was a trip to specifically see the Jets because I mean, in the 2013 Bomber season was nothing special, and I was just getting back into the habit of traveling to Canada at that point. So it's like, oh, let's go see the Jets first. The next year, I hit the Grey Cup, and I've just been Grey Cupping ever since. Plus a few other games here and there when the travels hit. So I've seen games in all 9 CFL cities. Loved them all. There's something positive in all of them. Yes, even Regina. I'm sorry, but there is. Um, so that's where the vast majority of my traveling's been. But I am looking at the calendar right now, seeing that the Jets are in Minnesota. Minnesota's 90 minutes away from us. I might have a trip to make, a day trip or even an overnighter, but probably a day trip. It's a 3 o'clock start in early April. So that might have to be a thing this year.
I think that would be a lot of fun too. Yeah, that oh boy, as far as where I've seen the Jets play, I obviously go to most games at Canada Life Center or Bell MTS Place, whatever you want to call it. Um, I always slip the tongue and call it Bell MTS Place. Um, but I have watched them in Minnesota many of times too. And there was one time where this was actually kind of funny. It was a couple of years ago. Um, Minnesota was not making the playoffs. This game was like the first week of April, so it was like the end of the season, and there there was this lady and her kid that were in front of me. And anyway, so of course I'm repping the Jets jersey, and game was Comrie was in net. If that gives you an indication as to how the game went, it was like 5-0 or whatever, and Minnesota was just stomping us. And so, anyways, I'm still cheering for the Jets, whatever. And this little kid, he's probably like 6 years old. It's actually kind of cute. He's like turning around and like yelling and saying like, Jets suck and stuff like that. And like honestly, like I thought it was kind of cute or whatever. Well, anyways, Minnesota scored their fifth goal, and it was just like whatever. And so I started clapping. I was like, "We'll see you in the playoffs." Oh, wait. And then the lady turns around. She's like, "That's enough." And I was like, "What? What did I do?" And like her kid's yelling at me. And I don't care. Like I said, I kind of enjoyed it, but her kid is yelling at some stranger that's sitting behind him. And anyways, and she makes it out to be my fault because I made a comment about the team.
Don't forget the refs always catch the retaliation.
Yeah, right. Oh, but yeah, I always like to go see them in Minnesota. Wild fans are actually pretty cool. But then I did go see them in Boston in 2020. That was actually really cool. That was right after the Patriots got eliminated by the Titans, and so the Jets ended up losing. It was a close game, but they lost. Yeah, I seem to have a bad streak about away barns.
My Bombers record for a while was abysmal. It's getting better lately, but when you start your Bombers watching career with 3 straight Labor Days, you're just signing up for that.
That's
and then
fair.
the fourth was in Tim Hortons Field when the
Mhm.
Bombers were awful. So, I mean,
Yeah.
game selections on my part were not great for a while.
Yeah, I anytime, and this is probably I'm surprised they haven't gotten beat up yet or anything, but I anytime that like the Jets lose or whatever, I try to find that like little dig. If someone's digging at me, I'll dig back or whatever. So of course, it's Boston and the fans are, heckling me or whatever, because I'm the only Jets fan in this section.
Right.
And anyways, so it's whatever. But anyways, after Boston scored an empty net, I stood up and I was like, "Go Titans!" And mind you, this was right after the Patriots got eliminated from the playoffs. And guy next to me, as he says a few words that maybe not necessarily be safe to say on the podcast or whatever, but he basically said that I have yes, we'll just leave it at that. And so he ends up inviting me out for beers afterwards. And so we go to this place called, I think it's called Banners or Banner or something like that. It's right outside of the Garden. And anyways, then we're sitting. It's actually a really nice bar. I'm the only Jets fan in here, though. Everyone's wearing black and yellow, and everyone's coming up and talking to me or whatever. Like, "Oh, did you come here from Winnipeg?" Well, not quite. But
I've
then,
had that walking out of a couple of stadiums, Regina and Hamilton. Let's just be clear. Hey, you got a long ride home. It's like you have no idea.
yeah, I don't know where I live. I mean, it was for all intents and purposes. I mean, I flew to Boston, so it's pretty much the same trip home because I flew out of Minnesota. But
Yeah.
anyways, in this bar it was during the mom's trip for like I guess it was their home game. The moms like finished their trip or whatever in Boston. So David Pasternak is in this bar with his family, and of course, like it's not like I could talk to him or anything, but because they had like a section kind of blocked off. But it was kind of cool to just see him chilling there. But that was probably one of my more memorable trips. Going to Boston, like I said, seeing them in Minnesota, seeing them in Edmonton, where else? Pittsburgh, Washington, and I think that's it. I can't remember any other place that I'd seen them. I would like to go to a game where the Jets play Chicago at the United Center, and I also want to see them play Montreal at the Bell Center. I think those
Yeah,
two,
that one's on the list. Yep, that one's
yeah,
gotta be on like, it's
uh,
like, I have a C I have or had a CFL list, like, this long, and, like, hey, if I can attach something to it down here, that'd be great too, but, like, I'm starting
mhm,
to check a lot of the CFL boxes, so I may have to start diverting a little bit.
yep, yeah, but I don't know when my next trip is going to be, just because, well, I don't remember if I announced it last week, but the wife and I are expecting a baby, and she is due in March, so yeah, I probably won't be taking those trips anytime soon.
No,
Maybe for a game next year.
yeah, you've got some life ahead of you.
Yeah.
A
So
lot of it will be good. A lot of it, you'll be shaking your head going, "Why did I do this again?"
yeah, and she's gonna grow up in a Steelers household. She's gonna grow up in a Winnipeg Jets, that is, household. So she is going to be a Jets fan. She's going to be a Steelers fan, and she is unfortunately going to be a Pirates fan. Maybe by the time she's an old lady, she'll see a World Series win. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if I can buy that.
Well, at least Bob Nutting won't be the owner anymore.
Someday.
Yeah, by the time that my daughter is an old lady, hopefully the Nutting family doesn't own the Pirates anymore. I'd be very shocked if they did at that point. All right.
Yeah.
Well, any closing remarks?
No, I'm just looking forward to continuing to grow this and seeing where it takes us.
I'm excited too, and excited for this road trip, and think the boys will do pretty well. So it remains to be seen. We'll catch you here next week. This is the Winnipeg Terminal, clear for landing for the dub. Go Jets, go!